I'm trying to explain it up to I don't want, I do not know.
I have a quorum. We could start without him, right? Well, Horizon time since says noon. I do have a quorum. We anticipate Dr. Rennie is going to be joining us on Zoom. I guess I can't start. Well, I guess I can't start the meeting if he's walking out. Never mind. It's not.
I'm gonna leave.
Yeah, I don't have a quorum unless Dr. Rennie signs in.
He's went to his post, so he'll be right back. There he is.
Okay, so we're starting the meeting, so at noon, go ahead.
All right, folks, we are going to start this time. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, March 7th. We all know each other, right? Pretty much. We've spent the last 2 months together. Okay, anyway, March 7th, 2023, City of Cheyenne Public Services Committee meeting. You folks know the drill. There's a sign-in sheet. If you have not already, please sign in so staff can follow up with you with information if you want to be followed up with, so that information could be accurate. If you have a phone device, anything of that nature, please either shut it off or mute it. And that also goes not only here in the room, but also for the folks online. If you're able to do so, we do very much appreciate that. If you plan to speak today, come on up, identify who you are again for the record. And as I almost neglected to do, go ahead and turn on the microphone if you would again, so everybody can hear you. And so it can be recorded into the record as well. So with that, Madam Clerk, first item, please.
Item number 9, ordinance third reading, amending the official zoning map of the city of Cheyenne, changing the road classification for County A1 agricultural and rural residential to N3 neighborhood residential high density for land located southwest of the intersection of Bridge Road.
Okay. And because we've had a lot of discussion on this, and because there's been a lot of meetings and a lot of confusion coming out of the last city council meeting, I have asked the city clerk, Mrs. Chris Jones, to give us a quick synopsis of where we are at this present time, and then we will go into Mr. Lloyd with his staff report. Clerk Jones, please.
Mr. Chair, Chris Jones, City Clerk. After some deliberation following the meeting, the last council meeting, there was a motion to amend to the MR zone. That MR zone amendment was not disposed of. The item, it wasn't voted up and it wasn't voted down. So then there was a motion to postpone. So the item was postponed under the amendment of the MR zone. The MR zone today needs to be disposed of, voted up or voted down. After that, we'll be back on the main motion.
The main motion as amended. So the first action that needs to take place is we have a hanging amendment to MR that we need to dispose of.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, so discussion should be then related to the motion to MR.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Clerk Jones. Mr. Oh,
Can you just get rid of that? Take a vote, get rid of it, and then we start. fresh.
Can you tell us exactly what MR is?
so public comment isn't open yet. He's going to explain that.
Thank you.
Mr. Lloyd,
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Seth Lloyd with
Please.
the City of Cheyenne Planning and Development Department. Owing to the fact that the amendment to MR has not been disposed of, I don't know if you want to dispose of that amendment, or if you want to comment on both the main motion and the amendment. I'm prepared to do all of the above. I would want to go ahead and give some background on both the main motion and the amendment. That would be my preference, but I don't know what your preference is of the committee.
Would you guys like to handle it?
Mr. Chair,
What would be your preferences?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I believe we sent the developer home to study all the various options that were out there. I do not believe our intent was to leave the MR hanging last week.
I do not believe so.
With both of those in mind, I would like to get rid of it and just start fresh with the main motion and hear what the developer is going to ask us to do.
Mr. Layburn, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that as was explained to us at the last meeting, although it is practice to zone and annexation when it comes into the city, there are further opportunities to look at that situation. It isn't an immediate need. So I believe that in the interest of moving this forward, I'd like to also clear the deck and get this MR zone taken care of. Soon we could do by vote.
Well, I mean, I have a process question. I'm sorry, this is a city staff member.
I'm gonna need some procedural as well.
If we vote down the amendment to MR, does that mean we cannot make a new amendment to MR, a second amendment to MR?
Madam Clerk,
Mr. Chair, for you. You can make any additional amendments that you would like to make at that point, and I'd ask the attorney to confirm that. Yes.
okay, so Madam Clerk, and Madam Attorney, please stand by. So where we're at right now, I'm hearing my committee say they want to go ahead and dispose either way of the amendment that we have on the table for MR. So I guess my question is then, do I need to go out to public comment? Where do I go from where I'm currently at?
Mr. Chair, public comment. Let's take the time and the postponement. If it was, then
I
not.
believed it was.
You can just go ahead and dispose of the motion, if the, that was the motion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lloyd, I appreciate your comments as well. Did you have, I think we're gonna go ahead and dispose of the motion, but
I was thinking I'd just wait here.
go ahead. I'd like you to. Okay, so, all right, so we have an amendment to MR on the table right now. Any further questions and comments from the committee? All those in favor? Opposed?
Oh,
All right, so the proposed amendment for this ordinance on third reading to MR fails. And now we're back on the original proposed ordinance on third reading to NR3. So right now we are clear, clean slate is my understanding. Mr. Lloyd,
Mr. Chair.
staff report.
Yes, okay. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Seth Lloyd. I'm with the City of Cheyenne Planning and Development Department. The application in front of you is a zoning map amendment, also known as a zone change. The proposal is to go from county zoning to NR3 neighborhood residential high density. While a specific apartment project has been proposed with the zoning map amendment, the apartment project is not the map amendment itself. And I want to speak a little bit to the differences based on stated city objectives. An apartment complex project is supported by Plan Cheyenne in multiple ways. The plan encourages the development of workforce housing, that is principle 2.5.8. Encourages workforce housing to be distributed throughout the community, encourages such housing to be along major streets, that's also 2.5.b, and encourages a mix of residential dwelling types in developing urban residential areas. That's based on the category urban residential in the future land use map. An analysis of the city done previously has shown that the city plan is short housing units on the order of thousands, not on the order of like dozens or something like that. Also, the mayor put forth a task force to study the problem of housing. An initial recommendation from that task force encouraged eliminating, and I'm going to quote here, quote, eliminating, quote, NIMBYism, not in my backyard, as being a barrier to affordable housing. End quote. The final report from that task force stated, quote, affordable housing is often misrepresented as only subsidized or supported through government programs such as Section 8. These misrepresentations contribute to NIMBYism, not in my backyard, that can hamper housing solutions, end quote. The conclusion here is that the project as a use meets all anticipated elements of the city's guiding principles that have been put forward. This use, apartments, is a permitted use in various zone districts. Is permitted in the NR3, MUB, MUE, and SS zone districts. The project is also allowed as a conditional use in the CB, MUR, NR2, and MR zone districts. Some of these zones are more appropriate to this location than others. The MUE and SS are probably not appropriate here, but due to the flexibility granted in the comprehensive plan for developing areas, a case could be made for almost all the other zoning districts I have mentioned. Commercial or mixed use zoning being appropriate as the property is near a intersection of major streets in a developing area. Of the potential zoning options, the applicant selected NR3. I might be putting words in the applicant's mouth here, but it might be because the NR3, the permitted allows apartments as a permitted use instead of conditional use, and would not allow the higher intensity commercial operations that the MUB zone would allow. The NR3 zone can also be used to develop with single family, duplex, or townhome development. While one of the other zones which allow apartments as used as a use may be more appropriate than the NR3 zone is not a bad action, and based on staff's analysis of review criteria found in the Unified Development Code, it would be applicable here. Staff's analysis is found in the staff report. Staff's conclusion is the application for the NR3 zone is adequate, but that the proposed project is fully appropriate based on the comprehensive plan and other stated city objectives. I'm available for any questions on the proposed zoning amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Questions from the committee for Mr. Lloyd?
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I'd like to say that Dr. Lenny joined the meeting at 12:10.
All right. Questions from the committee for Mr. Lloyd? Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Do we have a developer's report? Did you have anything additional, Mr. Bloom?
Chair, yes, I did. Charles Bloom, planning development.
Go ahead.
I wanted to add real quick that there is a protest petition that has gone around protesting the NR3 zone change. And also there's a second one that has appeared, which has not been certified, protest in NR2. But the one thing I wanted to comment about the protest petition is it was really presented with facts that weren't necessarily accurate. The NR3 zone district, it allows for a variety of uses, single family homes, townhouses, apartments, fourplexes, a variety of uses. The applicant did not have a requirement to identify what they were using or what they're proposing to develop at the land. They chose to be more transparent and to provide that information so they could seek comment and in direction from the governing body and from the neighbors. So I just wanted to note that that protest petition, yes, did go out. It has alerted us to some deficiencies probably in our processes, where in the future, when we have any protests that may occur for a specific zone district, we want to make sure that those protest letters are limited to just the facts. The fact being, this is a proposal to change to NR3. these are the uses that would be allowed here as permitted uses, and these are the ones that would be allowed here as a conditional use. When we have a standardized format, that petition could be circulated, so folks would not be signing potentially with misinformation being presented. And open for any questions.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Bloom?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bloom, so.
Go ahead, Mr.
Are
Whitworth.
you, are these deficiencies in the original petition significant enough that that petition is no longer valid? Is that what you're saying?
Chair through you to Councilmember Laybourne. No, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying that as a result of the information provided, it may have urged additional people to sign that petition. We're interpreting that liberally. It is a petition against zone change. So regardless of the information that was provided, we're still under the expectation that supermajority would be required for approval on third reading. However, we're just identifying that the methods to gain those votes may have not necessarily, or the signatures may have not necessarily been accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions from Mr. Bloom? Do we have a developer's report, please? Go ahead, Mr. Stephen.
Chairman, committee, so Jason Stephen with Bedrock Development. I apologize, so I kind of thought I was getting up here to talk about all of the research that we had done over the last week or so, and I can still answer any questions regarding that if you'd like, but it sounds like we're back on the NR3 zoning and not really so much about the MR zone that I think you guys just voted to remove. Is that correct? Is that how I'm interpreting this correctly? Okay. So going back to the NR3, I don't know that I could say it any better than Seth or this, Charles has said it already. But again, I'll just sort of reiterate that the reason we did the NR3 was for some flexibility and what we could do on a already county pocket that needed to be annexed in. Needs to have a lot of off-site improvements done in order to be developed to the tune of several $100,000, close to $1 million. In order to be able to do those off-site improvements and improve this property, we need to be able to do that economically, and doing so with single family will not work. It just doesn't. We've tried to look at it several different ways. It doesn't work. So the apartments that we've proposed already and have brought to everybody's attention is what our intentions are for the NR3. They're not low income housing at all whatsoever. They're a market rate type apartment complex that will fit in here very well. The type of people that these will be targeted to are your professionals, your teachers, your healthcare providers, your mechanics, your airmen, people who are looking to live in Cheyenne, want to live in Cheyenne, want to have the amenities of a nice apartment complex, but can't afford or don't want to purchase a house or a single family home. There's plenty of parking. We've gone through this with everybody before, but there's plenty of parking. Traffic is really not a concern. Planning department has recommended it. It's an ideal location. We have addressed the drainage issues and continue to address the drainage issues over and over with city engineering, our engineers. We continue to work on this. There's drainage problems on the site that we would fix. There's drainage downstream through Thomas Heights that everybody's aware of. That has been taken into consideration with this project. It's been over designed already to account for that. And it's been spoken to by Tom, the city engineer, several times about what's, the status of that is and how that's going to be handled. We will not add to that problem. I can tell you now that will not be something that we add to. So in that, I guess it goes back to the same NIMBY argument. We all know that Cheyenne needs multifamily housing. And we've heard everybody talk about that over and over again. But what it boils down to is not in my backyard. So how many times have I heard in the last 2 months, why don't you build this somewhere else? I've heard that over and over again. Yep, we know you need it. We need it, but not here. We don't want it here. You should build that somewhere else. This will bring in riffraff. This will bring that in. This will bring this in. And it's not true. And as Charles had mentioned, and I think we've all heard that the petition that was circulated, I do believe it was misleading. I think that the information that was provided in that and that we're told to a lot of the surrounding neighbors was misleading information. And I think that just misrepresents the project as it is. So what I would encourage, and I think this is what we're doing today, is for you guys to recommend approval of the NR3 zoning.
The chair does have a question for Mr. Stephen, but I will defer to the other members of the committee before the chair asks.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Seagrave, go ahead.
My understanding was the NR3 failed last Monday.
Yeah.
And we postponed to give the developer time to look at potentially other zoning options. I expect the NR3 will fail again today, and I'm just wondering if the developer has had enough time to look at other options that may fit into his scope or plan. Should this fail,
You
he
were,
wants us to amend it.
I mean, it's not a very long book, but you're reading my mind. That's, I guess to answer your question, sir, that's the $1 million question. What I'm hearing from you is that do you still feel that the NR3 is in fact the best zone for you and what you want to move forward to?
I do. We've spent
That's what I'm hearing.
quite a bit of time over the last week and a half or so, looking at other options for this property, and they're just not economically feasible. A single family doesn't even come close. We've looked at trying townhomes and that type of a development, and although we can get a little bit higher density based on what's allowed and the code requirements for doing them, we can't get the density that we need to make a development on this property successful. It's just not economically feasible. There's too many restrictions on this site. It's trapped, it's a county pocket. We're, pinned in on all 4 sides, so we're limited to what we can do. Drainage being another one. Like, we want to make sure that the drainage works. We want to make sure that we fix some of the drainage that's on the west side of the property. We can't do that trying to do single family homes. We can't do that with townhomes. It has to be a multifamily development in order to make it economically, just to make it feasible, period. Not even just economically, it's just feasibility, period.
Go ahead, we're still, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if the developer has looked at commercial applications, strip mall, restaurant, bar, those kind of things. Have you looked at that option?
So it's been a point of discussion, but the length of time that it would take to do the economic analysis and all of the research and demand versus cost and sitting down with the city staff to discuss what would be required of us in the event of commercial development versus residential. Remember, we've been working on this for 1.5 years. So we have all of that research and all of that focus on residential because that's what we know the city of Cheyenne needs. We know that we need multifamily. That's why we focused in on that type of development. So for us to sit down and look at a commercial opportunity, I mean, it involves us going back to our institutions. It involves, studies. It involves a lot more than what we could ever.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Seagrave.
And I'll be quiet.
No, that's okay. And no, you won't. No, go ahead.
We can
Go
talk
ahead,
about
please.
parking later. Anyway,
Yeah.
this is gonna fail today. So. If developer is saying I can only do NR3. I don't know that we need to spend an hour going through all of this again, because I already know that it's going to fail today. There will be no recommendation Monday night. And there's a very good chance. Very good chance that it will fail again Monday night. So unless we want to hear about parking and drainage and all of those things again, I don't see any changes that have occurred in the last. So I know we have to go through a process, but we need to spend all day on it. Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Stevens.
say, I don't think it has to fail. That's just my opinion. If I thought it had to fail, I wouldn't be here right now. I'm here to fight for something that Cheyenne needs, and I'm very passionate about it. I have lived here for the better part of my entire life. And I'm not done fighting.
Thank you. The chair does have a question for the city attorney and maybe the city clerk. I'm not sure which one of you. So anyway, my question is, Mr. Stephen made reference, so I just want to make sure if I understand correctly. So this is recommending bodies. We're going to make a recommendation or no recommendation today. Still has to go in front of the rest of the body on Monday for whatever disposition. My question is it still held to the supermajority standard of 8-2?
Mr. Chair, through you, Kristen Sinclair, yes.
I just wanted that clarification. I mean, Mr. Stephen alluded to that in his comments, but I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Well, like I said, I can open things up to public comment, but and I will. Obviously, we all know for the last however many weeks, we've been hearing what everybody had to say. I'm certainly open to that. We are on the proposed NR3. We do have all your comments, all your information, all your emails. We have heard the information about traffic, drainage, privacy, the school crowding, property values, trash, traffic. But I will go ahead and open it up for public comment again, just realize that, everybody's time is valuable.
Peggy, it's for me, 3231 Smith Place. I just have a quick question. I'm a little confused, because at the council meeting, I thought the NR3 failed. And that I thought then after that, it was just an amendment to change it to MR. So I'm confused about why we're back on the NR3.
There's a lady standing behind you. I think that's going to explain that to us, hopefully, Ms. Lester.
Thank you.
Because we've been dealing all morning with exactly your question, trying to sort all this out. So we're trying our best to figure this out, and I'm going to let the city clerk try to explain it.
Mr. Chair, Kristen Sinclair. The NR zone did in fact fail at the city council meeting. However, the governing body has the discretion to bring that item back up for reconsideration, either at that meeting or the meeting immediately following that. They did take that ability and they brought the item back up for reconsideration.
Because we tried to amend it to
Correct.
MR.
But it's a consideration.
So that is the motion of record. I believe, Mrs. Escamilla, did you have any further questions or comments? I mean, technically the floor is still yours before I go to Mr. Bolt, because he was up next.
Petition, the petition, all of the information on that petition was taken from that first meeting with AVI. So that's where the information came from. Thank you.
No, and I appreciate those comments, and I agree. I don't feel like we need any he said, she said on how the petition came about. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the petition came about, it was certified, so that's where we're at. So, Mr. Bolt, please.
John Wolf, 6670 Red Farm Trail. I first of all want to say that I don't have any skin in the game. Part of the project, I did sell the land. Just here is the developer and real estate person. I've been in business for over 50 years in Cheyenne. And my family's been in business for 90 years in Cheyenne, doing the same thing. And I guess without trying to reiterate all the different things that you've already heard about, I think one comment I want to make is it appropriate to have this apartment complex in this particular site? And to me, it absolutely makes some sense. If you look at the three major developments in Cheyenne right now, that's the Point, Saddle Ridge, and Sweetgrass. When they were laid out, and first about the Point, it was laid out to have single family duplexes, apartments. And if you look on Carter House, you see 4-story buildings adjacent to a single family. When we did Saddle Ridge, I was the co-developer of Saddle Ridge. It was 800 rooftops on the first 200 acres. When we laid it out, so we had single family duplexes. We laid out 10 acres for multifamily, retirement, assisted living, or even nursing homes, and a school. And so that's the natural thing, that's the natural norm of setting up a development and having this apartment complex adjacent to where they've laid this particular project out. Makes all the sense in the world to me. It's not gonna devaluate anything. It's gonna improve the roads, traffic and drainage you've already heard about. I'm just, I guess I'm just floored. What's the problem? You can go up on Converse, where the large apartment complex is under construction right behind
Walmart.
Home Depot. Next to single family. You come up the street. 2 or 3 years, 3 years ago, they built another large apartment complex. Guess what? The surrounding land around that apartment complex. That landowner is planning on more apartments, single family and duplexes. There's probably 30 acres there. And that's what you're gonna see. That's when it comes to the city council to approve an apartment complex on that particular corner. I live in Mustang Ridge. You think that the people in Mustang Ridge complain that they want an apartment complex across the street, that you're gonna turn it down? Would make any sense. And traffic. I think one thing that probably causes more traffic is the school. When we built, the city or the school district built a new school east of Mustang Ridge. My neighbors all said, oh my God, we gotta do something, the traffic's gonna be terrible. I said, suck it up. You gotta have schools. Twice a day, you're gonna have traffic. Yeah, that's just a necessary evil. So Gateway Construction, I've had the pleasure of working with them, selling them land, having to build projects for over 20 years. We have a first-class contract, local. And then within the next 2 or 3 years, we're gonna be faced with many contractors coming to Cheyenne out of town. And there's gonna be, I don't know how fast they're gonna, it could be a wave. If you think that we're gonna be overwhelmed. And the housing shortage, we already treat this to death. You, the city council, have said it time and time again. You keep thinking you're gonna streamline your process, improve things, so that we can facilitate to have a solution to the problem of the house. That's all I have to say. If they have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Vogt. Mr. Cecil, did you have anything new you wanted to
I
provide?
just had another question, basically.
Okay.
So back to the reconsideration thing, and I hate to beat this thing to death. But the way I understood it was that the MR3 came up. Then they made an amendment for the NR or MR. And then that failed. So they went back to the MR2 and that failed. And so then they had a meeting with whoever, and they decided to bring up for reconsideration, which I think we all thought was the MR and not the M3, but
No, that all happened on the dais with all of you there last Monday. The reconsideration happened when you were all in the room.
right, but I think we all thought that was for the MR and not the NR3. But
Right, so it was, so if I can answer, and again, it is confusing, so I understand, so if I can try to answer it. Yes, so it was the original NR3 did not meet the 8-2 threshold, the supermajority threshold, it failed 7-3. So the plan was to reconsider it, to bring it back up for discussion and try to apply the MR zone to it. So in order to bring it back up for reconsideration, one of the three people on the prevailing side, on the, who won, so one of the three people who voted against it had to bring it back up for reconsideration. That happened. That part was approved. And then, so my understanding now is then we moved into trying to amend it to MR that night. And that did not happen. No, because then instead of taking a vote on that amendment to MR, we voted to, there was then a motion to postpone for 2 weeks. So that's how we ended up today, having to dispose of that amendment to MR. So I think, and I saw that the city clerk nodding her head, but I think that's where we're at today. So we are then again at the initially proposed, because we don't have any other zone. The original ordinance was for the NR3. So that's what we're considering. And I don't know if there'll be any amendments to any other zones, but that's where we're at right now.
And I think it's just a misunderstanding of kind of what we thought. And the only other thing I'd like to say is that, we all do have skin in the game, and that's why we're all here, and that's why we're all been showing up to these meetings, because it doesn't fit our needs. So that's why we're all here, and that's all I'll say.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, you're not the only one confused. This has been confusing to a lot of us. Again, anything new on the proposed zone?
Elizabeth Staple, 3305 Thomas Road, everything is new. And, good afternoon, Councilman, Madam Clerk. The proposed high-density apartment complex O1 MR zone for this land addressed at 5908 Ridge Road. The homeowners are united in asking for MR for this land in the middle of our subdivision. We have submitted a petition against MR in R3 and against in R2. The homeowners want MR. Dr. Michelle Aldrich suggested MR, and the homeowners agreed with Dr. Aldrich. And this would be an excellent choice for zone for the address of 5908 Ridge Road. The piece of information has come to light since the last city council meeting. There was a complaint and a settlement against ABI. The complaint was because of sewer and irrigation issues. The papers you have there are certified by the clerk. They do have a raised seal on them in the appropriate pages. You also have a handout, you will see item 2 and 8 highlighted in blue. Item 2 is a misleading statement. The extreme high density apartments are located on Commerce, and everyone in the room knows how far Commerce is from Ridge. I've already stated that the apartments on the corner of Story and Ridge are 60 apartments. The Planning and Development Department denied in our 3 zone for proposed high density apartment complex because of non-compliance with items 2 and 8. Brad Emmons stood up and said he was sending water from the proposed high density apartment complex at 5908 Ridge Road to the water issued and flood ridden Thomas Heights, which has not resolved their flood issues for 4 years. That makes Brad Emmons and ABI incompatible with all the houses adjacent to the 5908 property and to Thomas Heights, which is across Ridge Road from the proposed high density apartment complex. I want to thank all the people who have voted for my neighbors and I, who are in the majority, and we have voted against the developer who is one man in alphabetical order. Thank you, Dr. Michelle Aldridge, Mr. Brian Cook, Mr. Ken Escobar, Mr. Pete Leyburn, and Dr. Mark Winnie, the homeowners and I of the adjacent properties of the proposed high density apartment complex and the homeowners of Thomas Heights with unresolved water issues for 4 years. We're wanting and are wanting the MR zoning as suggested by Dr. Michelle Aldridge. I invite Mr. Jason Stevens to come forward and explain, please, your drainage plan in detail so we can all understand what exactly you have planned for your proposed high density apartment complex. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Further public comment? Please.
My name is Jeanette Wallace, Bedrock Development.
Yes.
Construction. I keep hearing about MR and I want to kind of put some facts out there. Right now, we through Gateway have approximately 26, 27 spec houses not under contract that are in the process of being built. They are not selling. That doesn't include the 10 to 12 lots that we haven't even started to build on. All of the local builders that are selling off their lots because single family is not selling right now. I keep hearing about there's one man in the game. That one man, that one developer has 35 employees, plus their families, plus the vendors that we hire, the suppliers, the subcontractors. There is a lot more skin in the game than one man and his pockets. He's taking care of all of these other people and all the money that this development will put back into Cheyenne and the local communities, the local businesses, the mom and pops, all of that. And I just think that needs to be addressed too and pointed out. Thank you.
That's fair. Thank you. Further public comment? Come on up.
Hi, Rebecca Murchie, 3222 Commerce Road.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I'm learning, it's taken.
No, you're doing well. Thank you.
I just wanted to refer to what Mr. Volk was talking about with like Sweetgrass and Point and Saddle Ridge. When those were developed, the apartments and the single family homes were designed as part of the mix. That was the plan. And that's how, from the research that we've done, that's what's shown as what's appropriate when it's a part of the larger plan. The larger plan in the Crest Ridge, Thomas Heights area was always for something less dense. And, you know, okay, use that MR. From what I understand, and, you know, this whole thing is a lot of alphabet soup. But when I looked through and tried to identify what comes under MR, apartments can be included in that, as well as townhomes and cottage homes and that sort of thing. It's just a lesser density, if I'm understanding correctly. And I think, at least for myself, it's the density of the high density that I'm opposed to. So, thank you, and thank you for your patience with this whole process.
Mrs. Volk, did you have public comment? There you go.
Thank you, Wendy Volk, number one properties. As a commercial and residential real estate specialist, I just want to say is, when we have young families and other professionals coming into France, they don't have as many options as we would like for housing. And to put it in this into an MR zoning to do single family homes, we can't get enough homes to pay for the water and sewer. So here we have a company that's willing to invest $20 million into this 10-acre parcel. You can't squeeze the number of houses in there to make this economically a feasible project. So I am in full support of what Mr. Stevens and his project has proposed, and I will close my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have comment?
Me?
Yes.
I have to go back to work.
Well, that's why I wanted to give you specifically the opportunity if you wanted to before you left.
I think I've made the comments, but.
Okay.
everyone else has.
No, and we do have that, but I just wanted to give you the
Thank
opportunity.
you very much.
Go ahead, sir.
Alexander, all in court. Brian, Mr. Cook, you were out in our house at the counter, the northwest corner of the property. On that house last Sunday. And how many cars did you kill? Going by Holland Court westbound?
On a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. One. Dr. Aldridge was there on a Saturday afternoon, almost 2 hours, 2 cars. Mr. Johnson was out there for another 2 hours, previous Saturday, 2 cars. So this project proposes routing 279 additional round trips on westbound Holland Court every day. For the life of me, I cannot figure out why that doesn't concern anybody other than me. Thank you.
We are concerned with it. That's why we're here. Further public comment related to this issue? Come on up.
Rod Stone, Tom Place, flood victim, 4011 Summit Drive. And I'll keep it brief, but I keep hearing how the drainage situation has been addressed, it's all squared away. I'm here to tell you, I've seen nothing squared away. There's been no adjustments on the Thomas Heights issue, and adding any more water into Thomas Heights directly comes through my property, and I am not given any permission for any of that. The developer of Thomas Heights said that water goes to Charles Draw, and he sends it through private property with no contract, no permission, nothing. There was a plan to send that water along North College Drive to get it to Dry Creek, and I would like to see that happen, and then you could open all that up and develop it, and I have nothing against development, except I don't like to be flooded, so, thank you.
Thank you. Public comment. Do we have any raised hands online? I can't necessarily see what around the speaker, so I'll have to trust you.
Speaker. I don't see any reason.
Okay, all right. Seeing and hearing no further public comment. All right, at this point, the chair would entertain a motion. So we are on the original motion. Thank you for the clarification. All right, so we are on the motion for NR3 That's what is currently on the table. Do we still have Dr. Rennie?
We do, I don't know if you need that. If you-
Is there any further comment before we take a vote? Who was that?
Dr. Rennie, do you have something you want to say?
No, I do not.
Okay, all right, so we are on the. Is that?
It's Tim. I can mute him, hold on, he's muted.
Okay. Of all people.
It's a bow and
Yeah, he probably does. Okay, so we have the motion on the table for the NR3. All those in favor?
Mr. Chairman,
I just called for a vote. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Laybourne. If you have additional comments, go ahead.
yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. This is a complex and important matter. And is one that obviously has a lot of impact for both the developer and the neighborhood. But I really believe it's important for me to explain my vote.
Okay.
And so my reasoning is based on a couple of primary issues. One of which is the recommendation of the planning commission. There's a reason we have a planning commission. They look at these issues and make recommendations. The majority of that planning commission found that this density was inappropriate at that site. So I think that that's certainly something to take into consideration. Secondly, I've heard a lot of discussion of this process through day here that the drainage is taken care of. I fully understand that the developer needs to take care of the drainage coming off their property. And when that drainage system, as it meanders towards Child's Draw, is not in place or in place properly, that's not the responsibility of the developer, that's the responsibility of the city to see that that Thomas Heights project was properly designed and properly, those detention areas were properly developed 4 years ago. Well, 4 years later, we're seeing the effects of that inability. And I do want to mention that I did review the drainage documents that were available. And there are some real questions about the methodology of both detention and retention on the same site. I don't believe the geotech work's been done to determine if that's appropriate, and I think that's very important. And I do know that hopefully we're gonna get some resolution here, but it was neglect on our part to ever allow Thomas Heights to be developed like that, and now we're talking about using something that's inadequate to at existing time to add a significant addition of water. I also, Mr. Chairman, have a question. As I understand it, what we're talking about here today is the postponement of the zoning. That's what's on the table right now, correct?
Well, can you,
Mr. Chair, through you, Mr. Layman. No, the item was postponed at the council meeting. What you have before you today is that postponed item. We're voting to make a recommendation to take back to the next governing body meeting for.
on the NR3, so the initial.
Yes, on the NR3. So I understand that. So my question is, and there seems to be some confusion here about reconsideration. Now, if there was to be a reconsideration of this matter, am I correct that it would occur at the next council meeting? One of the three people that voted against the project and thereby vote the 2/3 majority, that would be reconsideration. This is not reconsideration.
So we,
Mr. Chair, the item was reconsidered at the last.
that's why we have it right now.
They brought it back up. It was on the floor. They made a motion to amend by MR. that was not disposed of. At that time, the item was postponed, so it's back here. The item has already been reconsidered. You cannot open this.
Very unusual. Thank you.
Mr. Lloyd, if you have anything additional you want to provide.
I would like to provide a clarification from
Okay.
staff,
Please.
planning development staff here. Due to the fact that the main motion was not, the amendment was not either voted up or down at the last city council meeting, I felt like it was appropriate to discuss the main motion in case the amendment gets voted down. However, there was that amendment on the table, so I don't know if you want to discuss that amendment or make that amendment or make another amendment to a different zoning district. I didn't want to put that out there, so we're clear as where we are process wise.
I will leave that entirely up to the committee if they want to amend or how they want to move forward. But right now, my understanding is that we are considering the NR3, the original NR3, which I believe you've presented several, including today, several staff reports on, and we've heard a lot of comment on. So thank you. All right, so Mr. Laybourne, unless you have additional comments, I'll go ahead and call for a vote, and then we'll move on from there. Again, so on the ordinance on third reading, the proposed ordinance to NR3. On the proposed ordinance on third reading to NR3. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No.
All right, well, there will be no recommendation. I move the council meeting on Monday night. Next item, please.
Number 10, ordinance third reading, amending section 1.3 of the Unified Development Code, UDC, amending the enforcement regulations of the UDC and making other conforming amendments.
And let's give it a minute, Mr. White, if you're willing. So. We need to figure out. No, it's on the agenda. Mr. White, go ahead and move forward in the interest of time.
Chair and members of the committee, Connor White, involved in departments. Before we use the text amendment for the zoning code enforcement section, you see there is a proposed substitute, and I'll do just a quick explanation of what that substitute is. All that is basically on page 4, it's section 1.3.8. It's removing the words revocation and the word or. So it used to say revocation or suspension of a member license. We don't mention revocation at all. That was taken out when it was basically going through all my drafts, especially after we had the work session. We decided to take out revocation or revocation, basically. So that's all that substitute is basically removing those words just to clean it up and make sure that section is labeled correctly, so nobody's confused when they read it. Other than that, I have no additional information to give at this time. The council did approve this on second reading, but I'm available for any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. White. Appreciate that. And thank you for your patience. Questions? Go ahead, Mr. Laybourne. You've got your light on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. White, we've discussed this previously. Am I understanding correctly the opinion of planning office that it comes to review of landscaping on site plans that has failed, that is included in this ordinance, that it's the belief of the office that no time limit should be put on that period of time, so that and if there was to be a time limit, am I correct, it would go in a different part of the code.
Chair to Councilman Lamborn. Yes, the planning office does believe that a time limit should not be placed when it comes to how far back can we go to enforce. Because when you start adding time limits on how far back we can go to enforce, like I had mentioned, at council, just with the examples of. If we decide to put a time limit that says you can basically enforce landscaping prior to the adoption. C, for example, that is almost like telling any person who doesn't have an updated site plan or who has a site plan prior to C, we're not gonna put their landscaping, if we're gonna allow. We can't do anything about it. If we were to put a time limit, it probably would be a better section, because once you put a time limit in its enforcement section, it's basically saying we can't enforce anything prior to that time. Just trying to get the ball real quick. I guess that's pretty much what I have with that is, with having a time limit, it can make enforcement typical based on when that time limit is placed. This is not necessarily the section to put it in. And it would be staff's preference to not have a time limit placed in there. I guess what I was trying to think of was that, as mentioned, that we do have that amendment that you can do to site plans, so somebody could amend their site plan that was prior to the UDC and amend it to change their landscaping to better meet our current requirements, which could be a reduction in certain cases. So there is that option rather than having a time limit. We do already have measures in place that allow those applicants and developers to come in and change their landscaping to potentially reduce a more likewise to begin with.
Thank you, Mr. White. Any further questions?
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Rennie.
Dr. Rennie, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have a question through you to Mr. White, and that is, if I or the landowner, someone is determined that they have to update their landscape, that they have some landscaping features that need to be replaced, and they want to do something different from their 20-year-old, 25-year-old landscaping plan that is maybe more water wise, which I think we should be encouraging. What is going to be required of them? Do they have to file a new landscaping plan to reflect what they want, their changes? And if they do, is there going to be a fee for them?
Mr. Chair, to you, Councilman. Go ahead. Yes, basically, if somebody wants to change their landscape plan, and it's a 20-year-old landscape plan, and they want to change it to be more water wise and meet our current code, they can do that. What we have in place is a site plan amendment that we allow for anybody who has a site plan. They would submit to our department for that amendment. It is a $100 application fee. And it's generally a quick turnaround, but then that would basically give us a chance to review their new landscape plan against our current code. And then approve that. Once that's approved, that is their new landscape plan that they will now follow, and that's the new landscape plan that we will now enforce. So there is that process in place to do that. And anybody has the option to do that.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Dr. Rennie.
So if we are in the process of updating reviewing our landscaping codes to become more water wise, but essentially if I wanted to do a water wise plan, update my plan today, and it didn't match the current UDC, I assume it would be denied then?
Mr. Bloom's gonna try to answer that. Go ahead, Mr. Bloom.
Chair, through you to Dr. Renee Charles, Bloom, Planning and Development Director. Technically, the answer is yes, it would be denied if it didn't meet the current regulations. We are actively working on making the amendments to encourage water-wise landscaping. Jeannie Vetter, our Parks and Greenway planner, has been working on some amendments to the landscaping code to get that clarified. We have been asking folks to substitute, turf grass and those types of, heavier water intensity, type of landscaping with drought resistant and native seed, those types of landscape treatments. So we have been doing that today. So in the event, a business owner had an area of sod or the, bluegrass along those lines, and they wish to convert it into a water-wise landscape that meets some of the xeric principles. So for xeriscaping, not just xeriscaping, which is changing into just pure rock or something like that. We would work within our administrative adjustment processes to allow those items to be incorporated or by site. But really what we're looking at here is in the event that we wish to have site plans expire at some period, those amendments would not be best put in the enforcement regulations, put in our procedural regulations, which are in Article 2 of the development. So I hope that answered your question. Sort of touched on your great points there.
Thank you. Dr. Rennie, did you have?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Further questions from the committee for Mr. White, Mr. Bloom, for staff? Go ahead, Mr. Laybourne, you have your light on.
I think I'll wait till.
Okay. All right. Further public comment on this item? Okay. All right. At this point, the chair would entertain a motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Laybourne, seconded by Mr. Seagrave. Go ahead, Mr. Laybourne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We speak in favor of this ordinance change. There's a lot of good reasons for it, and some of them were just explained to us a little while ago by Mr. Bolt. Talked about over the years, there have been many attempts to have as clear and as understandable and as brief a process as we can have. And so over the years, we've also done a number of things like adopt the UDC code. And this adjustment, I believe, is reasonable for the ability of the department to review those applications. And obviously, I'm very pleased that we're finally going to get some ability to deal with those site plan issues. So I'm a yes on this, and I think that it's definitely a lot of work, but it will make things smoother, and that's a good thing. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Seagrave.
Would move to amend by substitute dated March 6th.
I was gonna ask and hope one of you would do that. Thank you.
Second.
Any questions, comments from the public on the proposed substitute? Any hands raised? All right, back to the committee. Any questions, comments on the substitute? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed? Back on the, do we need to go back on the original?
We need to go back to the main motion is back.
Okay, all right, back on the main motion as amended. Comments? Concerns from the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Dr. Rennie.
I don't think if we go back, let use 15 years as an example, going back 15 years, pulling out the landscape plan and enforcing that and requiring somebody to file a new landscape plan to update it and
You froze and cut out. We lost your audio.
and again, I am not going to support the change.
Okay. Dr. Rennie, we lost part of your audio there.
I think that, try and recap it really quickly. I think that requiring somebody to go back and file a new site plan is not making government easier, making anything easier for people or streamlining it. Their landscape plan is somewhat of a fine, so I don't think there's anything easier about this or more convenient for the public about this. And I think going back that farther than like 15 years or so is government overreach, and I'm still not going to support it.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second. We're back on the original motion as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
All right, the recommendation for next Monday's city council meeting will be for approval on third reading on a 2-to-1 vote with Dr. Rennie and no. Item 11, please.
Number 11, ordinance third reading, amending the official zoning map of the city of Cheyenne and changing the zoning classification from MUB, mixed use business, and CB, community business, to CB, community business, for land located between Old County Jack Road and Lincoln Way, west of Russell Drive.
Mr. Lloyd, it's been a while. Good to see you again.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this application proposes unifying the zoning on a parcel that's created by a plating action. The plating action has already been approved by this body. This just kind of is a clerical cleanup so the property can develop in the future with a clear set of regulations. There's no changes proposed with this application since it's second readings, but I am available for any questions.
Just to clarify, Mr. Lloyd, the city's the applicant on this. We don't have a developer on this one, do we?
Mr. Chair, the city was in concert on the plating action, but the parcel involved is actually not the city's parcel, so this would be a developer. This would be an action with the developer.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I just before we go to the developer, any questions from the committee for Mr. Lloyd? Mr. Seagrave, you have your light on. Go ahead.
Error.
Mr. Emmons.
Mr. Chairman, the council members, covered pretty well. Again, this parcel that got two zones was because we replatted part of small Paul Smith way to line it up through the kitchen code property. So it is just clerical in nature because of the road real.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee for Mr. Emmons? Any hands raised? All right, public comment from within the room. No hands raised. Right, the chair would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Seagrave, seconded by Mr. Laybourne. Further questions or comments from the committee? All right, seeing and hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The recommendation for next Monday's night will be for approval of this ordinance on third reading. Next item, please.
Number 12, ordinance second reading, annexing to the city of Cheyenne, Wyoming, tracts of land situated in portions of Sunnyside Edition and Sunnyside Edition second. Section 12, Township 13 North, page 67 west of the 6 p.m. Benton County, Wyoming, generally located east of Ridge Road between Charles Street and Pershing Boulevard, west of Wills Road between Cheyenne Street and Pershing Boulevard, and northeast of the intersection of Pershing Boulevard Road.
And this is city initiated, so Mr. Bloom.
Here, members of the Public Services Committee, Charles Bloom, Planning Development Director. This is the first city initiated annexation that we've had in Park Five. This is located, as described, northeast of Ridge Road and Pershing Boulevard. And this is comprised of 5 properties owned by 4 different entities. Up to date, we have we've actually had a lot of public outreach where we've had mailings to the property owners, invited individual property owners to a community meeting, discuss the ramifications of the annexation and discuss with them what zoning could be appropriate process. We are being annexed, and as you can see, we have a zoning map that is related to it. That's the next item on the agenda. So far, 4 of those 5 properties have contacted us and have indicated support. The manager of the Wells Fargo branch had indicated that they are looking at a significant savings regarding their hazard insurance due to the change in the emergency response. I'm not going to indicate the exact dollar amount because that would be for them to disclose. But they had said there would be a savings because they have had emergency response times up to 45 minutes in the past for fire response in that area. So they're excited about it. The other properties on the western area, they are adjacent to Ridge Road, which is in the city right now, which has water and sewer availability. So they would anticipate that this would set the stage for future development of that property. All areas adjacent to these county pocket areas are within the rights of way that are within the corporate limits of the city, and they're maintained in accordance with our roadway maintenance standards. There was a public hearing held last Monday night. That public hearing was advertised in accordance with state statutes, and of course, we went above and beyond the notification required for state statutes and notified well affairs and as statutorily required by certified men of that public hearing. No one has protested that the annexation that resides or owns property within that annexation area. I'm open for any questions you may have regarding this.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom, for the staff report. And I know I just want to recognize that you and your staff have done a lot of work on these projects and this one in particular to get it here. So we do appreciate that. Questions, comments from the committee for Mr. Bloom? About Mark. Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Further public comment. Do we have any hands raised? Seeing no hands raised, further public comment from here in the room, Mr. Emmons.
Council members, chairman and president, just wanted to say, I have gotten some pretty good feedback of people coming in, talking to us about what the pros and cons. I think the outreach has been good, and so I just want to give the council some feedback. I think it's a good project moving forward. I know you hear a lot of things out there in the public, how you're taking these. But from most of the discussions I've had with people in other county pockets, they have seen some, I've been able to show some positives that come forward. So say just keep moving forward and maybe you can get a little bit more public notice of people coming in and meeting with staff to really find out the differences between being in the county pocket and the city. So just want to get some kudos for getting this moving forward.
Now, Mr. Emmons, are you saying just more public awareness as far as their ability to come in and meet with staff? Just that they have the ability to ask questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through you, yeah, a few women that I've talked to, they kind of come in and hear about something else happening and they don't know to go to the website, they don't.
Okay.
Go through those things, so, and then being able to sit down, the staff, I think that just more outreach. I am even listening to positive, I think. A lot of people don't think about the insurance factor, so making sure that that's listed.
Right.
Hey, here's positive, another positive.
Thank you. I think those comments are duly noted. I saw Mr. Bloom shaking his head affirmatively. So any further public comments? All right. Do I have a motion? No. Okay, seeing and hearing no further public comment. It's already been a long one. Thank you for keeping me straight on this. The chair would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Seagrave, seconded by Mr. Laybourne. Questions, comments from the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Laybourne.
Well, I'm glad I've lived long enough to see this happen. This is a issue that's been hanging out there for a long, long time, and certainly, I'm very familiar with the neighborhood. Family lived out there. And the changes that's gone through have really led us to the point where we needed to do this, where they were completely surrounded and were some excellent projects, I assume, as Mr. Emmons referred to, are going to come along as a result of this. So I think this is a real good effort on the part of the administration and office. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I echo your sentiments about the work of the administration and staff. Further questions and comments from the committee? All right, seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The recommendation will be for approval of this ordinance on second reading next Monday night. Item number 13, please.
Number 13, ordinance second reading, amending the official zoning map of the city of Cheyenne, change the zoning classification to MUB mixed use business and CB community business for tracts of land situated in portions of Sunnyside Edition and Sunnyside Edition second filing, section 12, township 13, north, 67 west of the 6 p.m. Generally located east of Ridge Road between Charles Street and Pershing Boulevard, west of Wills Road between Cheyenne Street and Pershing Boulevard, and northeast of the intersection of Pershing Boulevard.
Mr. Bloom.
Chair, members of the committee, Charles Bloom, Planning Development Director. I just would like to know, this is the zone change map. This is what was previously displayed. What this allows for is the county, well, right now it's all county mixed use, which isn't like our mixed use. Our mixed use is more of an urban form requiring you to build up to the a specific area, 10 feet of the property line. This is just allows for a mixture of uses. It can still be in a suburban form and can still have a lot of outdoor display. What we're looking at here are two different zone districts that discussed with a lot of property owners. The one on the north, which is the area where the supply sergeant was, that was proposed to be zoned to MUB mixed use business. That will allow for development that'll be closer to the roadway and parking areas in the rear. And there are special design elements for window placement, the amount of windows you can have and how they look in relation to the surrounding neighborhood. The area where Qdoba and Dog House, that Pershing Marketplace, that is an area, so is Jimmy John's, that are zoned in NB. So that was what you could expect for new development in that northwestern area. The remaining properties on the south, that's on the Pershing Boulevard corridor, which is more auto dominated. That area lends itself better to CD community business zoning. That is similar to Delrange Boulevard. So those are the zone districts that we're proposing for those areas. The MUB designation of that request actually come from the property owners, as well as the CB on the southwestern area. So supported their future development intentions of what we'd like to work with the properties for. Again, and I should note the one property on the corner of Cheyenne and Hills, and that used to be a single family home that is presently undergoing a site plan review through the county planning office. We've been working with the landowner and county planning office to essentially work with them on development of a site plan for what will be a landscaping company that will have some landscaping equipment that will be located outside, and then have a future plan for an office building and a garage that would also have that landscaping business. Upon annexation, that site plan will essentially create a non-conforming use, because in the CB district and in the MB district, outdoor displays are just incidental sales like an department store or home improvement store that just happen outside. Those aren't included. So we were working extensively with that to essentially have them gain their entitlement through the county and be able to continue that use. We're working with them so far in the process.
Questions from the committee for Mr. Bloom? Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Public comment. Any raised hands? The chair would entertain a motion.
Move. Second.
Moved by Mr. Laybourne, seconded by Mr. Seagrave. Further questions and comments from the committee? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The recommendation for next Monday night city council meeting will be for approval of this ordinance on second reading. Item number 14, please.
Number 14, resolution authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to send a final plat for Dell Range Edition 6 filing a replat of a portion of tract 25 Dell Range Edition, city of Cheyenne, Laramie County, Wyoming, located southwest of the intersection of Ridge Road and Palmer.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this associated with the zone change that we all spent moments of time on earlier in the meeting. There's no changes in this application. Basically, it's just cleaning up the property and making it one large lot, kind of a clean slate. And that would be appropriate in a variety of zone districts. So even if we went with a different zone district other than NR3, the plat might still be applicable. However, I will defer to the applicant as to what their desire is. It is my opinion that it doesn't hurt to approve an item. And we've already gone through all this process, we just will, but if they don't want that to happen, that's fine with me too. I'm available for any question on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Appreciate that. I think we'll go ahead and see if Mr. Stephen and Mr. Emmons have an opinion on how they want to proceed.
Mr. Chairman, council members, for Emmons ABI, the applicant, I think can continue to move forward. That Monday night for their canvas sets. These things, I don't think there's any reason
It's already in the hopper.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Emmons. Appreciate that. Okay. Any further public comment related to this proposed final plat? Any hand raised?
Don't see any.
Chair would entertain a motion.
So moved.
A motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
I'll go ahead and give that one to Rennie, if you like. Moved by Mr. Seagrave, seconded by Rennie, Dr. Rennie. Okay, further questions and comments from the committee? Go ahead, Mr. Laybourne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, very neat drainage arrangement that was proposed here is primary reason that I'm opposed to this final plat. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr.
Mr.
Rennie,
Chairman,
you seem
yeah, I do
hesitant.
have
Well, go ahead.
I could not hear, I'm still driving, so I could not hear what Brad's comments were. So could you repeat them for me, please?
He's motioning like he can come back up again, but I mean, basically the gist of it was that they're okay with the final plat continuing to move forward. Did I state that correctly, Mr. Emmons? And okay.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, they're okay with proceeding. Any further questions or comments from the committee? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
I need some clarification.
Dr. Reddy, can I just clarify that you are in support of approving this plat?
I voted yes. I was a yes vote, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just with the time lag, it wasn't clear. We just wanted to get clarification.
I understand.
Okay, so the recommendation for next Monday's city council meeting will be to adopt at 2-1. Good. Last item, please.
Number 23K, memorandum of understanding between the city of Cheyenne and Granite Peak Development LP, Clear Creek Land Company LLC, Laramie Land Holdings LLC, Cheyenne Logistics Hub LLC, and Swan Ranch LLC to memorialize the payment of past fees by the parties and to restate prior development agreements.
Go ahead, Mr. Bloom.
Chair, members of the committee, Charles Bloom, Planning and Development Director. This is a modification to an agreement in the second part one of what will be a second modification. And this is intended to basically catch up Granite Peak on payments related to development on infrastructure fees at Swan Ranch. What the agreement failed to allow in the past is the ability for a corporation to transfer into other corporations that it owns, so subsidiaries. What has happened there is Granite Peak has ended up creating other corporations and then transferring to themselves for tax purposes and for other reasons. That was not accounted for in this agreement. So what this agreement accomplishes is the ability for us to, number one, recognize that and allow that to occur. And secondly, to settle the amount due, which is based on the infrastructure fees that were detailed in the initial agreement. Also, one other piece of this agreement is that it clarifies that two different parcels that were transferred to nonprofit organizations, one being the CFP Park and Ride, the other one being another piece of land located in the southern portion of the park, that they be exempt from the fees because they are not specifically for development as intended for the Swan Ranch. So with that, I'm open for any questions you may have. Representative is here from Granite.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Any questions from the committee for Mr. Bloom? Go ahead, Mr. Laybourne.
So the park and ride area there off Southwest Drive, since it's excluded from this agreement, do you foresee infrastructure improvements that will be needed when that opportunity arises to actually construct that park and ride?
Chair, through you to Councilmember Laybourne, and specifically with the CFD Park and Ride, that parcel is very large. And any of the improvements that are proposed associated with that park and ride, those are all private improvements that would not be funded from this infrastructure fee. This infrastructure fee, the intent was for it to be directed to the city so they could provide public infrastructure improvements such as possible signalization, other roadway enhancements that might need to occur during the life of Swan Ranch Park. So the short answer to the question is no, I'm not anticipating any infrastructure needs that are not presently funded directly related to the CFP partner.
Thank you.
Further questions, comments from Mr. Bloom? Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Was there a developer's report? If you would like to make any comments, you certainly may. You've been patient with us. You've been sitting for a while, so I wanted to give you the opportunity if you'd like to.
Joe Stevenson with Granite Peak Development LP. I think Bloom covered it pretty well. But I'd be happy to answer any questions. We just want to get this resolved. And I just might note that one thing we intended with the development agreement called for these fees to be collected during closing. And we assumed the title company was taking care of those, and they did on most of the sales, but there were a few of them recently that they did not. And we're prepared as soon as this agreement's all signed and sealed, to catch up those fees immediately. In 5 days, I believe is what the agreement calls for.
Thank you. Any questions? Developers? Thank you, sir. And like I said, you've been very patient with us today, so I wanted to give you the opportunity. All right. Well, any further public comment? Public comment? Any raised hands? All right, the chair at this time would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Mr. Chair. I would move to amend by substitute dated March 6th, 2023.
Second.
All right, was amended by, is moved and seconded on the original motion, and then it is amended by substitute. All right, I'll go back out to the public for public comment. Any public comment related to the proposed substitute? Raised hands?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions or comments from the committee related to the proposed substitute? Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, the amendment passes back on the original motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, the recommendation for next Monday's night will, next Monday night will be for adoption as amended. With no further business, we are adjourned.